welcome to the podcast, Ray. It's a bright early morning. You're in Sydney. What have you been up to? I bet you've been on a run already, have you?
No, although it's getting cooler in Sydney. It's quite nice this weekend. I went for a run around the harbour with friends.
Oh, nice.
And why wouldn't you? They think I'm mad because every time we run over the harbour bridge, I always go, isn't that amazing that we can be here and do this? And of course, if you've been born in Sydney, you're used to it. It's like running down Oxford Street and saying, isn't this amazing? Locals wouldn't know it.
Well, I'm disappointed you didn't go for a run around with your podcast friends. But there again, I'm in bed at that time.
You're very welcome to join any week, Dan.
I go woken up by my carers this morning. I mean, my kids. It's quite early in the morning because you've got a guest dialing in from the US. So today, Ray,
yes,
we've got an amazing special guest called Tina Austin. Now, Tina is the CEO and founder of GAInable. And that's a bit of a play on words. It's Gen AI, GAI, GAInable. And she runs a lot of adoption programs across the US. She's a ASU and GSV Top Woman of the Year for 2025. She's part of a OpenAI featured faculty. She's a Microsoft Innovative Expert. She's a policy advisor for California, I believe, Department of Education to do with AI policy. And I even noticed a Microsoft Dynamics certificate on her profile, which is amazing. And very rare, as rare as your shirt collection, right? So welcome, Tina. And where do we find you today?
Thank you. Thank you both for having me on this podcast. And you mentioned walking on the Sydney Harbour, and I love that. I just got to do that last year for the first time. And I'm glad to be on this podcast with you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Where are you dialing in from?
I'm from California. I'm in LA. So I'm in the Pasadena area, and it's almost in the afternoon. Well, now it's afternoon here, and it's quite sunny despite my background.
That's amazing. LA keeps every time I think of LA, I think of Galaxy's Edge when I went to Disney. And it's like the best thing ever.
So I know you from LinkedIn in the sense of I feel like I know a lot about you because I see you building communities, sharing your practice on LinkedIn, but it's unusual to find teachers seeing LinkedIn as a place. So I'd be really interested to know your journey. Now I see you as a sophisticated AI person, but where did it start? Because for all of us, it started 3 years and 120 days ago, mostly. Where did your journey start?
That's a really interesting question. And I don't know how much I want to rewind back to before I was teaching in academia and already teaching AI ethics and bioethics, but I was still very limited within my space. And I think when generative AI came along, the same week ChatGPT came available to the public, I was interested in experimenting and sharing the results with my peers, but there was only so few people in my department that were really allowed to really speak about this topic. And I think it was around that time that I just wanted to see who else is out there and share my experiments with. And I think it was either LinkedIn or looking on Eventbrite to see if there's any Eventbrites, if there's anyone out there that's doing this. And I think it was around the same time I started really posting on LinkedIn. And quickly the community grew. And it was around the same time that Microsoft invited me to do a little talk for them in Chicago. And they had other educators there. And it was my first time presenting outside of my topic because my field was biomedical research and bioethics. And so AI came to the conversation. It was already part of our lectures before. So then I added that. And then next thing I knew, other faculty were like, yeah, this is very interesting. Can you come and do this for our computer science students? And I was like, are you sure you want this for computer science? And then there was people in humanities, and then it grew and grew. And instructional designers. Next thing I knew, every month, and then it became every week, someone was asking me to come and present these slides. I mean, I was doing different slides everywhere and sharing experiments and realizing, yeah, there are other people there too. And then the LinkedIn following grew pretty quickly. And next thing I knew, there was more talks and more people that wanted to share. OpenAI said, hey, can we share some of your experiments on our website? And then Microsoft, and then other teachers in Australia and Europe. And so even though the space is very crowded now, I feel that there's still a lot of opportunity for folks that are new to get their voice out there and hear about what others are doing, and don't feel discouraged, because I really came from a place of I don't know if this is going to resonate with anyone, but I'm just going to share this and quickly. Yeah.
So can you tell us, that's an amazing story there about how you've come to drive this narrative. Can you tell us an honest lens on the state of AI in education in the I know it's a large country like in Australia, it's nuanced, right? But what is the actual happening in the schools in the US at the minute? And how is policy as well being determined? And are people reading that? And I'm just fascinated to know what's really happening in the US because you see schools every day, right?
Yeah. I would say it's very vastly different from Europe and Australia in the way that we have all these tech companies over here. And for a long time, there's been a question about guardrails and what do we want to do in California and what can we even talk about. At the same time, tech companies push their own products. So, for example, we had access to ChatGPT EDU through our education account. I don't believe outside the US, my colleagues could access ChatGPT EDU. So that was to us something like a more safer version of ChatGPT because it doesn't train on your memory. It doesn't train on your prompts as much as the others do. And so from the outside, it looks like the US may have a single approach to AI in education, where in reality, I feel like it's a lot more fragmented. What you see on the ground in the classroom is still very different from another school or another department. Students already adopted AI. A lot of them did right at the get-go. There's still some students that will say, hey, I'm still afraid to use it. And that's fine. We never want students to feel that they need to use it. But we do have like experiments in my classes where students get to like compare the output and realize that their own thinking is so much more valuable in certain ways. And there's ways that AI can help them. And then policy, as you mentioned, is trying to catch up. I feel that over the last year, the state governments and school districts have started working with educators to propose legislation and policies, but it's really catching up. And I feel that there's less of a single strategy in the US and I guess more of a large national experiment.
And I just thought you when you mentioned that, California is very progressive sometimes with the laws that they introduce, whether that's to do with like self-driving cars or technology generally. And they often trailblaze, and the rest of the US kind of comes along when they come up with their policies because of the progressive nature of that. Do you think, when you look at it, is it a framework for AI in California then, for example? And does the teachers even look at it?
Honestly, I feel like we have a framework fever. There's too many frameworks out there people are coming up with, and they all sound good, but each of the frameworks have their own flaws. And California does tend to try and move first when it comes to technology. But at the end of the day, like I think was it the School of Indianapolis, they were the first school to I think implement AI into one of their courses.
Right.
So as much as we'd like to be first, there's others that are racing with us, like against us, and to try and come up with their own guidance frameworks. And there's none of these are strictly mandated, even though California task force that you mentioned in your introduction of me, our task force is just a guidance, like what we put together is just a guidance framework.
And there's like the other one that's always being raised, probably thinking, oh, don't ask such dumb questions now, Dan. But the other one that's interesting is in the US, you've got ISTE, which is the big kind of like educational technology thing. And they've got some guidelines as well around AI. So I always wondered, this seems to be frameworks and governance things. And, you got your state legislation, you've got these ISTE things. If you're a teacher in the US or anywhere, what would you look at? What would your key thing be? Or would you just carry on as normal? What would your advice be to that teacher who's thinking, oh, I'm getting frameworked out here?
Well, the problem is there's no school seems to have, from what I've learned from talking to different schools, it's not like everybody has access to ChatGPT or everybody has access to Gemini or Microsoft Copilot. So some schools, they're strictly told you're only allowed to use Copilot or you're only allowed to use Gemini. And when I go to their work, sometimes I just drop in on their workshops just to audit and just listen in to see how things are being done. And they're so vastly different. They're being told, just use this tool and follow this UNESCO framework, which, by the way, came out like 2 years ago, which is like, to me like, oh, wow, this is not really a good idea. So I don't think teachers need to worry about those to become experts. They just need to stay experts in their own field, but do experiments with thinking with AI as a thinking. I don't know how to use the word thinking partner because that kind of anthropomorphizes the AI, but really to find your best use cases in your own field for your own classroom. For me, it started with I wanted my students to learn that Dolly the sheep was not a true clone, no matter what ChatGPT was telling them. It is a true clone. I wanted them to learn about the importance of mitochondrial inheritance. And so I made a custom GPT and I had them compare the custom GPT to regular chat GPT. So they're like, oh, this is why our professor wants us to use this. And then it turned into use cases for someone's English class or someone's history class. And so I would say they're vastly different because when I started doing that, people said, hey, can we just copy your syllabus? And I would say, well, that's fine, but I'm using AI in these ways to teach students about X, Y, and Z. If you want it for your classroom, let's start with the problem first. And that's how I came to come up with UnBlooms, which was starting with the problem first. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then build AI around it instead of having AI as a thing that you're going to have in every lesson. And so then I came up with this decision-making tree and like what would be good to not have AI in and where would it be helpful to have AI in. And kind of like painting, which is like my other passion, it's just kind of like adding bits there. And yeah, just the branches just kept evolving.
So Tina, you just threw in there UnBlooms. Now, we've talked about Bloom's taxonomy a number of times. Dan, I'm not going to ask you to explain it again because not sure if you're there. People think about Bloom's taxonomy as a way of developing things. So, it's a kind of structure and very rigid. And then you just said the word UnBlooms. So just take me back there to what led you to think that you need to do the opposite.
Thanks. Because we know in the age of AI is really good at the top of this triangle. So if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, it starts off with what you're memorizing and understanding, evaluating, going all the way up to creating something, whether that's students have to create a dissertation or produce something at the end. So AI can already do that for you. So some colleagues said, let's do a reverse Bloom's and we'll start with create first and then go all the way down to the first layer of Bloom's. And we tried that in a STEM class. That didn't really work so well because AI is also good at evaluating and it's also good at like those middle steps. And we don't always want to start with create. Maybe we want to start with something else. So my thought was, why don't we just pick this apart and just focus on solving the problem? So meeting the learners where they are. And so in the end, at first I was like, it's going to be a staircase that's going to go down. And then I thought, okay, it's just going to be a circle. And because learning is recursive, our learning isn't linear. We're not like always arriving at a conclusion here. Sometimes we think about our thinking and we go back and it's messy. So that's where the idea of UnBlooms came. And this whole circular idea of you meet learners where they are. It could be at evaluate, it could be at understand, it could be at create. And then AI is in the periphery. And then the next question was, well, how do we have them actually evaluate AI outputs? And so I proposed this metacognitive scale where it starts off with comparing no AI to an AI output and then saying what the student thought before they used AI, what did they think after, and kind of reflection. Mm-hmm. So it's easier if I share a graph, but I know we're some of your listeners are audio listeners, but the idea was just really having students think about their thinking and think about the AI's output and only use AI when they need to. And so the book that I recently released on Amazon is just a workbook right now to help people draft their lesson planning. But I'm hoping in the next editions, we're going to have one specific for educators, one specific for students, one for people in marketing. So the more specific it is, my goal is to help more people.
So Chris, so to unpick that and just to see if I'm correct here. So say if you were doing that topic on mitochondrial DNA kind of thing with Dolly the sheep. So some people will come in with an understanding of that. So they'd be evaluating it against other cloning technologies, for example. And so they did in that particular area of the circle. Some people might have no idea what even mitochondria are. So they'd be going in and maybe understanding. And then next thing,
you got it.
Right. Okay, that's cool. I love that. That's really interesting.
And
Yeah. And it actually has a custom GPT too. I'm happy to share the link with your viewers so that if they get stuck, it'll help them. It'll say, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And it'll walk you through
Gotcha.
breaking down the question.
wow, there's going to be
Yeah.
loads in the show notes for people to check out afterwards because we'll get all those links. The interesting thing is, as you're describing that in the context of learning and teaching, I also think about it in the context of people's understanding of AI. Whenever I'm with a group of people and we kind of start to do some work with AI, everybody's at different perspectives about what AI is. There's not one perspective.
That's
Some
right.
people just use it like they use Google. Some people don't use it at all. And other people are, it is my thinking buddy and I can't start work without it coming in and helping me with creativity or whatever. So it's not just, I got it to write something, but it's people have this complex relationship with it.
Yeah.
That sounds like that fits into that level of thinking as well. It's not just about understanding of the thing you're teaching, but it's also understanding of the tool. And I'm not sure a tool is the right word for AI, but the role it can play.
Absolutely. Yes. Because AI is not one thing, right? It can be several things. And what someone thinks about it is very different. And I've seen that on LinkedIn firsthand, where I think we agree on it. And then we start going back and forth on this new research, like, they're looking at it in this way. And so that's really,
if we unpack that even further then, sorry to interrupt you there, but I just jumped, your conversation you're doing is like stimulating all sparks in my brain here. What is the crack with assessment in the US? And what are your thoughts on that? Because that's big, everywhere at the minute. Have you got a point of view on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of educators, especially because I came from higher ed, a lot of professors have this traditional way of doing things where they have their 30 slides deck and they've been using that for decades and they don't want to change it. And they want to come to the class and read off of the slides and have a memorization question at the end. That doesn't work so well now with, people doing online exams. And a lot of educators are saying, well, I don't want to learn it. I don't want to have to deal with it. So we do have those educators. But the question is, should we allow AI in assessments or ban it, which is something I hear more often, right? With how do we grade the thinking? And this was one of the ideas of having them reflect on, for example, this Notebook LM podcast. And in the way with UnBlooms is like, I uploaded my stem cell lecture and the two podcasters go off track and they talk about this biology of something that doesn't really exist, or they loop back. There's an argument between them. Sometimes there's good, insightful information. So there's some value in listening to this podcast because students that are not all visual or like to just listen to audio benefit from it. But there's also another way for them to learn. So I really see it as a way to revolutionize thinking. But some might say, no, I don't want to use it. And then they see these use cases and they're like, okay, I want to implement that in my lab class, or I want to implement that in my whatever class that they're doing. So it always comes up is how do you grade the thinking versus the output? And I think more and more people now, especially I'm seeing on LinkedIn, are going towards that direction. Well, of course, there's also conversations about AI agents, which I don't know how much you want me to deviate from the question here, but AI agents that automatically go and solve your assignments for you. And so there's a way to redo assessments there, but it requires a little bit more effort from the instructor to.
In 2025, like when you talk to the agents there, like it's fascinating that the assessment stuff kind of seems to be similar narrative kind of everywhere. So it's sort of reassuring to our listeners, I'm sure. But you talked about the agents there, like I said, 2025 was going to be the year of the agent, and then it wasn't. So like, I'm just going to keep saying, this year's going to be year of the agent, and then maybe one day will be. So when you're talking about agents and GPTs and things, is that a maturity that's getting there in the US? Are people talking more about agents and custom GPTs?
Yeah, I think definitely people that are in my circles are talking about it more because they're noticing tools like there's something like a couple weeks ago, Einstein. Perplexity has their own agent. ChatGPT has its own agent called, I believe, Codex. There's Claude has its own agent. So all of these agents, what they do is if you can have them automatically go in the background and do things for you. So I've heard of employees using it for their mandatory training on the job so they don't have to sit for actual training. I've heard of students doing that for like their online assessments. Of course, it's not encouraged and it's not something we want students to do. But my proposal was, well, if we redesign these assignments in a way that involves a step, for example, where they're looking at this image. So I knew when like a publication came out a couple of years ago with really bad AI images, when I brought it into my class and I said, hey guys, guess what's wrong with this image? Only the students that use their eyes could tell, oh, this is completely wrong. This is not what the cell looks like. But the students that use AI to complete the assignment couldn't figure out why the cell is so badly drawn and it's so perfect. So that's one way you can redesign your assessment. That is, when I say I'm using the word, not using the word AI proof, but really having students think about things more critically.
It is, like you mentioned there as well. I'm interested in this, and I'm going to take my unconscious bias out of this as best I can. But you mentioned there Claude, you mentioned Perplexity, a lot of other things. Are you getting, when you're going in as an independent consultant into schools, is there any concerns? And I know you mentioned OpenAI in the US has got slightly different terms and conditions, but what we are seeing quite a lot in Australia are teachers using consumer tools in the classroom and uploading PII and things. And maybe it doesn't matter in the US because a lot of the companies that are developing this are in the US. So they kind of terms and conditions and servers and services are in there anyway, so it doesn't matter. But have you got any thoughts and a point of view on that?
Yeah. So again, it really it's so vastly different from one school to another school, whether it's public or it's private, and they're figuring out. I've met schools that like 6 months ago they would say, "No, we have it all figured out," and then a couple of weeks ago, like, "No, please, we want you to like start." Like we really realized we didn't have it all figured out. So I think in the U.S., because there's strict laws around student privacy on FERPA and COPA, schools are not technically supposed to have educators use their personal identifiable student information onto consumer tools. So it's different if I have my own personal ChatGPT versus another instructor wanting to use their Claude. So really it comes back to what that school's best practices are. Do they have an agreement with Gemini? Do they have one with Claude? I know friends in Europe, they're using a lot of Claude over there, but it's not because the teachers are careless. They just have all the technology arrived faster than most people could. And so these tools, I feel that depending on if they're enterprise or institutional, that's the first thing I ask when I go to advise these schools. And then we start with what are their pain points? What are they, struggling with? And then going on to, again, by district. So like I've worked with schools in New York, I've worked with schools, and like I'm going to Texas in a week to do something for them with a different tool. So I always have to read up on what is.
Do you come across schools that have not or are using using consumer tools? And do you have to teach them that? Because I suppose that's quite a risk as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I posted 2 weeks ago, there was a school. This was actually a guy who said he's presented his presentation 250 times across different school districts. And I was really surprised because I don't know if you saw that post, but he said the first thing he tells them is to build this custom GPT. And the first thing he puts in his custom GPT is don't be biased and don't hallucinate. And
fix it. Solved all the problems.
So because the space is a little crowded and not everybody is being vetted in a way that, like, oh, wait, this person just advised us to do this. So I like to start from scratch. And I always start with like what AI can't do, what we shouldn't recommend, and then go on to the cool things we can do, rather than start off with the cool things we can do and then tell people, don't worry about your data. Because this is what this person was saying. He was saying, don't worry about your pictures. It's already out there. Don't worry about your data. It's already out there. I felt like, oh, wait, I want to raise my hand and tell everybody in this room that this is not correct.
Yep.
I wouldn't go down.
Well, actually, I think the situation is similar in the US, but in Australia, students' private details that includes their name is stuff that has to be protected. You can't go as a teacher and put that into a consumer tool because you're breaking the Australian privacy laws. And the same would be probably in most other countries. You're right. I'm not sure if people understand that. And then once they understand the basics, they understand what they can and can't do. We've got a long journey to go on this, haven't we? We know you wouldn't put a class list up onto Facebook but I don't think we know that you wouldn't put a class list into consumer AI, ChatGPT with consumer. Of course, I could put that there. It's not doing any harm, would probably be the reaction. But of course, there's a whole legal thing in there. And that's a long journey to get people aware of all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even the memory that supposedly you can toggle on and off, there's still issues with that. There's lots of research, I'm sure you've heard, that it's still not entirely like it gets wiped out or it's still there. It's just, you can't take the memory out. You can't like go and remove it from those layers. So there's lots of, it's always better to be cautious. And I think most educators may not understand that until you like start off with AI 101. Like what are,
And how are they managing students then with that? When they do 101 with educators, what is the general approach the schools are doing in the US for students?
To be honest with you, I've proposed this to many schools myself. And a lot of the time it's like, this sounds like a good idea. Let's talk about this next quarter. Let's talk about this next year. And it's always like, well, we have a committee that's dedicated to this. And then you go talk to the committee and they're like, well, we're still trying to figure out ABC here and we'll think about this. And it's I don't know if I should say it's not a priority, but what I'm saying is it depends on what school, how comfortable they are with AI. And this is not all schools, by the way. There's some schools that I've seen, they're way ahead. They're, many years ago, they were already thinking about having their own AI person doing things. Other schools, they just want to kind of tick the box and say, look, we have a person that deals with AI, so we don't have to worry about it. Where I feel like this is something that everybody has to be talking about. Maybe it's because I'm passionate about it and I think everybody should be talking about it.
Yeah.
Schools are like...
What about the parent side then? Because I know there's a group of followers on Blue Sky quite a lot, and they Paces Vancouver. Shout out to them. And they're very much thinking about AI from a parent's point of view and the dangers of kind of utilizing technologies like this early and thinking about things when they've implemented these technologies. Have you got a thought on parents and that kind of entire ecosystem? How are they being brought along in the US?
Yeah, so it's really interesting you asked this because I just came back from South by Southwest EDU and I was for the first time surprised to see there's actually parents in this room. I expected it to be educators and ed tech companies and schools. So parents I'm seeing are having more of a presence here and they're asking, is this safe for my child?
Yeah.
Is this going to replace real learning? And I don't directly usually talk to parents, but I'm really seeing that it's already part of their world. And when I do go to like conferences and talks, and sometimes there's a parent there, they're saying, hey, how can I make sure my child has a job at the end of this school? Like, how do they stay ahead with AI? And they'll tell me their school isn't doing much on this front, but how can we still teach students to interact with it responsibly and still benefit from it? So these are, I think, really good questions and there's a huge opportunity for whoever, because I was just, again, coming back from these edtech startups where there's so many ideas floating. I think this would be a good idea for someone to get into that space and help with getting parents involved in understanding the AI systems. Because I know the prevailing narrative on the LinkedIn is AI is bad. And there's always a post going viral about something that was poorly used. And I agree with it. It's like, oh, this was a bad use of AI. But also there's good use cases and there's knowing when to use and when not to use. And that was the idea for GAInable, which was like, is this GAInable? Should GAI be used here? That was my idea with the company. And so to kind of help people with understanding when to implement, when not to. And so I think this is a really important discussion.
Yeah, no, definitely.
We started with talking about LinkedIn and some of the things happening there, which is where we came across you initially. So for the listeners that haven't yet found their tribe, they haven't got a community to practice, or maybe they're involved in a smaller one. How do you find the inspiration, the stories, the good practice, the links to this, that, and the other without being overwhelmed? What's your view on building that sustainable community that's helping you to learn? Like, who do you follow? Who do you listen to? Where do you go and look? Where do you get involved? What's your advice?
Well, for me, That's a good question. For me, it started off because I was, before this, teaching a deep research deconstruction class. So every week we'd bring in a paper into the class and we would deconstruct what did the authors try and say, what was really lost in this translation, what were they trying to pretend that they solve, and what did they not really solve, and really being critical of that paper. And then on LinkedIn, when AI papers come out every week, I started this trend of Too Much Hype Tuesday, where like there's a thing that's going around, hyped up, and then there's only like 30 participants in this study, and they didn't really prove this was happening, but they wanted to let the preprint out and say ChatGPT was rotting their brains or this was happening. And so I got pulled into a lot of these debunking research papers, and that kind of led me to believe that everything that's gone viral with like over 200 or 300 likes, I'm going to go in and really like look in this paper more closely. And that's where the follow and who not to follow came along, because there's people with like 250K followers that were really aggressively pushing a certain narrative about a certain tool. And then I'd ask them, where's the evidence of this? Or like, how does this show this? And either they weren't able to answer, or they would feel that this is too much and I don't want to get involved. And so it wasn't to make anyone uncomfortable. It was really just to get to the bottom of these studies. And I think that was a moment for me where like I realized, wait, if we're just going to, if we question everything, it's better than just accepting accepting all these viral takes. And you'll see a lot of my posts are, yes, this is good, and here's what's also I want to add to it. I won't just like repost something. I like to say, well, what's one more thing? And it's not to be critical for the sake of critical, but it was just really to kind of have this discussion with people. And maybe I'm wrong, and then that's where I got to meet so many great people that were like, hey, I work as a software developer, or hey, I do this, and so I was learning from them. And then I would go and read up on that topic. And the next thing I knew about, like, for example, these new terminologies that AI companies were coming up with, like GDP val or MCP, and realizing, okay, this is something that Anthropic invented, or, kind of.
Yeah, it's interesting because you need to be like ahead of the game, don't you, to know what's coming next in your field so that you can support schools through that narrative. But there's still a lot, I assume there's still a lot of people who are, not using AI. And we're in this bubble in LinkedIn, like you're saying, there's some people that you when you follow things in LinkedIn or X or Blue Sky, you'd swear everybody's using AI. And actually that's not really the case. And we need to get everybody use AI to bring all of the kind of C-level up and bring all of students and teachers up. Is it a big equity issue in Australia? Not Australia, in the US? Around there is a big equity issue in Australia, but I'm sure there's massive issues in the US. But is that coming up front and center at the minute?
Oh, of course. I mean, equity's always been a big thing, but I would say nowadays, like you mentioned also FOMO, a lot of people have the fear of missing out. So everybody I want to know exactly what tool I should use and what's the best. And there's no straight answer to that. So I see a lot of people doing workshops on like Claude this and Notebook this, and then a week later Claude changes its buttons, and then the whole workshop is different. So as long as you know the fundamentals and you feel comfortable with one or two tools that can help solve your problem for you in a way that it's not redundant, in a way that it's safe, in a way that you're not spending more time doing all these corrections, because sometimes it's not a good use of AI if you're just going to spend a ton of time doing that. Then there's value in it for sure. But I'm never going to just promote company X or putting the tools above teachers' work, because it is a lot of workload for teachers. And I think in the US, I've spoken to many lecturers that are rightfully resisting it because it's an added workload for them to keep up with these tools. So that's where people like me come in and will say, look, if you have problem X, Y, and Z, here's a quick way to do this. And just for everything else, forget it. Like, it's not going to be a good use for you to like do 4 hours of Copilot training when
you use your workspace or something. Yeah. Is it allowed to get in touch with you though? We'll share this stuff in the show notes. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you if you're doing this?
Wow. So my email is Tina@Tina.Austin. It's really easy to remember, Tina@TinaAustin.com. Or if you have LinkedIn, you can just follow me there. So 2 others, Tina Austin's there, but I'm the one right now with
the best one,
right? I don't know. But yeah, if you go to maybe Tina Austin AI, that'll probably come up. And then there's also my website, tinaaustin.com. And my email is probably the best way. And there's also a way to contact me on the website.
Awesome.
And yeah.
And so I think one of the takeaways I've got from this is if I'm a teacher and I'm still on my journey and I see all these people around me that are supposedly experts, I'm going to take away that half of them probably don't even know what they're writing about. The other half of them may be experts in a very broad field, but I've still got a space as a teacher to be an expert about my class, my circumstances. Maybe I'm in a year 7 class in a rural area and my students are all sons and daughters of farmers and agricultural workers. That's something I can be an expert in and think about how AI fits into that bit of the story. I don't need to boil the ocean. I can just do that one thing.
Yes, stay skeptical. I would say that would be my one piece of advice is be skeptical about everything you hear, cross-check the sources. Even if you go to a workshop and someone says, hey, do this and there'll be no bias, look, question that. Ask, how could there be no bias? Why is there bias in the first place? Why are there hallucinations in the first place? But I would take everything as like a question mark and then go back home and really think about it critically. And that's where you really get the answer.
For me, the takeaway, I still can't get out of my brain at the minute. I'm trying to work it all out, but that entire cyclical kind of methodology around, and I'm thinking about it in my own kids' point of view, because some people go in blinker, don't they, and think I'm using AI to understand, explaining to me like I'm 6, but there's so many entry points for kids to increase their learning as they go in up if they use it properly, that even kids who are A grade students have a critical awareness of how we can support their learning, whereas the students who are not even on the scale can help them get entry into the learning concept. So that cycle is kind of fascinating. I think you're definitely onto something there. Trademark it.
It's funny because you weren't the first to tell me to trademark it. And when I was in Oxford presenting it, some people told me to trademark it there, and I just trademarked it there. And so now it has a little TM on it. But
were you at AEIOU?
Yes, were you there too?
Yeah, I meant to go, but I couldn't make it this year. But Sarah did invite us over this year, later in the year, in October, I think it is.
Fabulous. Hey, that was a great conversation. I think everybody will have taken an idea, a thought, a thing that they can go and do from that. I am going to go away and look at Bloom's taxonomy, turn the map upside down and work out what UnBlooms taxonomy is. Awesome.
Well, I never called it a taxonomy. I just called it a framework because it's really to develop better judgment about AI, thinking in the age of AI, and be better critical thinkers. But thank you for those.
Thank you,
remarks.
Tina. Keep up the amazing impact.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thank you for having me.